Next, we have our next contestant. Come on down.
Another amazing speaker, Chris Kubecka.
Hello. Buenos dias, Tactical Edge.
How are you? Welcome.
Oh, good.
Welcome. So let me, just before, I've heard about Chris for the first time when I was listening to Darknet Diaries. And I thought that was a fantastic episode. So how was that experience like? Because in fact, we have two of you today.
Oh, lovely.
That are Darknet Diaries alumni. You and then Ira Winkler was also
awesome
on Darknet. So how was that experience for you?
Well, it was great. I really think that Jack, who does the podcast, is a really great storyteller. He fantastic with the music. He researches a whole bunch to add to everything. Works with anyone who is interviewed to make sure that what he thinks is actually reality, back and forth, right? Because once it's out there on the internet, it's kind of hard to take down. Yeah. And it was a great experience. It was much better than the actual real world experience.
That's funny. So before I continue, I want to present you to Salma, our co-host.
I'm really impressed with your summary, really. I want to introduce you to all the people that is watching us in this moment. Fearless and powerful speaker, saves countries, fights cyber terrorism, advised several governments as a subject matter expert on cyber warfare and national defense, profiled by major media in the USA and Europe, USAF military combat veteran, former military aviator, and USAF Space Command, defends critical infrastructure and handles country-level cyber incidents, cyber warfare, and cyber espionage. So Chris, that is quite a professional summary. I'm really impressed. Welcome to Tactical Edge. And tell us, you are right now in Holland, yeah? Correct?
Yep, and the Netherlands. And I had to turn my fan off. We're actually having a hot day, right?
Another one?
Yes.
So how are you doing with the air conditioning?
Oh, no, we don't have air conditioning here, really. It's just a fan. It's old-fashioned air conditioning, your hand.
Oh, that's right. It was what I forgot her name. That she said that she put on the air conditioner at her home in England, and you say you have fans there, and that sometimes your temperature goes to 42 Celsius. 42 Celsius in her home because of all her computers.
Yeah.
And summers over there are incredible. So I've been there. The first time I had a summer heat in Oxford, my wife and I went and bought 3 fans right away because we couldn't take it. It lasted for 2 weeks or 2 weekends, the summer heat, but it still was awful.
Wow. And what is your presentation about?
Well, I'm going to show how hackers, good and bad, can hack anything in the world, whether it be something on land, space, flying, Latin American chemical processing companies like Mexican, the wide variety of everything.
Look at Salma's expression. She's like, what?
Very impressed with your summary, and now with your presentation, I will be like, oh my God. So welcome, and really thank you for being with us today. The stage is yours.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen. All right, well, buenos días. Gracias por la oportunidad de presentar a su audiencia. So thank you very much, Tactical Edge, for having me on, and it gave me an opportunity to practicar mi español, because I'm half Puerto Rican, so it's all good. So this is called Hack the World, and It also, if you watch the previous presentation by Michael Bell, it shows what can happen if you don't have a security team or a CISO where you're not watching out what you're doing. Even small, medium, and larger size businesses are included in this presentation. And I also want to add that any of the tools and things that you see are actually done using free tools. So if you're just starting your security team and you don't really have a budget, but just hopes and prayers, you can actually do more than hopes and prayers, and you can actually get some free tools that are very useful. So there we go. If you don't know who I am the CEO of 2 companies, one in the Netherlands, one in the United Kingdom. And we do a lot with critical infrastructure security, and also things like cyber warfare and emerging threat technologies that a lot of governments have to be concerned about. I'm also a distinguished non-resident fellow from the Middle East Institute in the cyber program. And previous to all of this wonderfulness, I was the head of information protection and intelligence for the Aramco company, and did a lot of interesting things in the Air Force, both flying and dealing with command and control systems for space. And I am a reformed black hat hacker because unfortunately or unfortunately, I started early as a bit mischievous and devious, getting busted at the age of 10 for breaking in to the Department of Justice. So what are control systems? Now, we have to think of the very fact that our modern world is driven on digital technology. Everything from what's in your pocket for your smartphone, what you're viewing on right now. It could be an aircraft. It could be something in space, which is very important for navigation. It could be industrial when it comes to making hand sanitizer, toilet paper, or anything. Or it could be if you have a fancy schmancy coffee maker where it is programmed to do a series of things. So when you press a button, it does something that it's supposed to do. So it's all around us. And we've got a lot of challenges with this type of technology. We want to innovate. We want to have the ease of digital technology, but unfortunately that comes with a lot of risks, especially since not everyone is a cybersecurity expert. Very few people are in this world. And we have to think of the fact that if a company's been around for a while and on the internet, they're going to have a lot of things that they don't know about, that are going to be like having a house with 50 doors on the ground floor. And if you don't know where all those doors or windows or what have you are, then you're going to run into problems with trying to protect them. Now, we also deal a lot with legacy devices. So when you're talking about, for instance, a nuclear power plant, the hardware for those plants are meant to stay in business and producing for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years sometimes. And then suddenly you start mixing them with industrial IoT devices and SCADA systems, which could be Windows-based. Here is a huge mismatch of things that are supposed to last for almost forever, put in place with things that last 3 to 5 years. And you suddenly introduce IT vulnerabilities into a production environment. And perhaps say the chief engineer, he or she did not understand the risks when saying, yeah, this is great. We also have to deal with this wonderful thing called geopolitics. Not everyone is your friend. Sometimes you have frenemies, and sometimes you have straight up enemies. Now, more and more countries have not only defensive capabilities, but offensive capabilities as well. A good example is that I like to use it. A lot of people don't realize that Ethiopia actually has a highly developed offensive security program because they've been dealing with wars and skirmishes with Eritrea. And here we have countries all around us with this type of technology and capability. So you never know if from a bad trade negotiation that something else might occur. Now, when most of us, I'll say most, go to the store and go, I want your most expensive smart TV. Most of us don't do that. Most of us certainly don't do that in the business world. So we're looking for a good price. and vendors are looking for that good price point whilst also getting enough revenue and return on investment. So it isn't always in their best interest to enable security in their products, or if they do, it might be a bit outdated, or you might find out that you can't patch the stuff, or that they never actually security tested. So they have to make money, but unfortunately that turns into profits over vulnerabilities. Now, most of us don't operate in this island where your company or yourself, you make everything. Your company's self-sufficient. That's an impossibility. So we have to deal with third parties. It could be your law firm who handles sensitive information. It could be technology partners, et cetera, et cetera. And this is where, unfortunately, a good deal of incidents and breaches and security incidents can come from, is from the third parties. And if you do have the capability, I highly recommend that you keep an eye on your third parties to try to limit your exposure. Because most contracts with third parties still don't have a lot of cybersecurity written into them. And unfortunately, selling the product is typically more important than putting security in. And so even if you get something where they're trying to bolt it on, it's still not going to be as good as if the vendor or the program or the project or the team thought about security beforehand, because it saves a lot of hassle and there's also a higher return on investment. So one of the reasons why I'm in critical infrastructure is because I love the fact that it does more than send bits and bytes. It actually moves our entire modern world. Think about the water that's coming out of your tap. That's an industrial system. The power that powers your laptop or computer or your web browser that you're watching this on right now. But we also have to think of, where do I get bottled water? Where do we get beer? Beer is all industrial nowadays, except for if you're like me and you try to make your own at home. But it's all around keeping our modern world stable. And without it, it would be much more difficult to get by, and our lives would not be as easy. So we have critical infrastructure and industrial control systems, ICS, and we also have, although you've probably heard the term, Internet of Things, also the industrial version of Internet of Things, which attach to these systems and are integral nowadays as part of those systems. Now, one of the things we have to take into consideration is the majority of critical infrastructure is actually privately owned. And any government, it doesn't matter which one, it's going to be difficult to legislate, regulate, and dictate how secure that critical infrastructure should be or has to be, because there's going to be a cost factor, especially when dealing with legacy devices. And who's going to actually pay for this? So a lot of lawmakers and policymakers and think tanks have to grapple with the fact that in a perfect world, everything would be risk-free. But unfortunately, the reality is this costs money. And how much should water cost coming out of the tap? Should a hospital, which the medical profession is also considered critical infrastructure, should they have to choose between buying a life-saving medical IoT device or securing that hospital network? So there's a lot of questions. Now, one of the things I did last week was I went ahead and did a full internet scan using the ZMAP project with a company named Census.io. I want to stress this is from a free account. And this table showing Please Hack Me is the top 10 industrial and industrial IoT systems. So your ICS and IIoT systems that I could find from any country around the world on the internet. And the problem with this is you have exposed on the lovely internet that all of us love and also are scared of because, cyber criminals, ransomware, all the bad people like I used to be, where you've got production systems that are saying hello. And one of the big problems with this is the fact that many of these industrial protocols that you see, especially like Modbus, when it was first invented and written in the 1970s, there were no security requirements. So if you can craft it in the correct format, you can actually send a command to a Modbus system with no authentication, and it will accept that command from anywhere in the world. And we've heard also various things like from one of the Mr. Robot episodes where the protagonist was able to get into the target system by going through the HVAC. And here we have a whole bunch that are exposed. SCADA systems are like the brains of all of this industrial system nowadays. Building control systems, that could be anything from a security station, that could be at a hospital, at a police station, or it could be an elevator. So I don't think any of us watching this want to see this many systems with very little to no security setup exposed on the internet. So to give you a brief introduction, this is my personal favorite protocol is Modbus. The reason why it is so adopted still and in its variants is because when it was put out, it was not proprietary, it was open source, it was free to use. So everyone's like, yay, free! But nobody thought about security back then, which is very unfortunate, but there weren't the same level of risks in the 1970s. Now it's supposed to transmit data from more of a slave to a master architecture, but it's very important that the data that's sent through what's called set commands are not manipulated, that they maintain integrity. Now, another thing to consider with production systems is confidentiality is not the big concern. If we think about that CIA triangle, usually in IT confidentiality is queen, and the case of industrial systems, actually availability is queen. The reason being is when you flip the switch to turn on the lights, you want the electricity to come on. So it's very difficult sometimes to go, should I use encryption? But then that causes latency because you have to decrypt, encrypt, et cetera, back and forth. So you want things to be transmitted as quickly as possible. Another thing to consider is the way that Modbus is laid out. It uses something called ladder logic, which is very similar to a lot of firewall logic. Now, if you've ever seen like a checkpoint or other vendor firewall, nowadays it has 2,000 to 9,000 rules. What happens is if something above the rule that's more important gets modified or changed or just isn't written correctly, it can actually negate and moot all the rest of the rules. So you have to be very, very careful when you set these things up. And the types of things that you'll usually see Modbus running on are things like a programmable logic controller. We call them PLCs. And a lot of different vendors make these, sometimes with their own proprietary stuff. Like on the chart, there was something called S7. And that's Siemens S7, which is a proprietary PLC language, so to speak, a protocol language. And it was one of the models of Siemens PLC that was actually used in the Stuxnet attack. So you can imagine if modifying maliciously a PLC can basically destroy nuclear enrichment hardware in the country of Iran, what could it do to other industries? And so these are used in a lot of industrial environments, including beer. I like beer. So one of the tools that I'll show you, and this is the thing with a lot of tools, is there is not the realization that you can dual use them. And since I'm a bit naughty, I like to dual use things. And this is a tool called the Chipkin CAS Modbus scanner. And it's typically used for technicians and engineers. Now, one thing to understand as well about Modbus is the fact that it might, in some instances, operate over TCP, but commands are done in a hexadecimal format. And although you might find one particular machine online, there are multiple ones, up to 254 connected to that one machine that you see, because of the way that they operate on a particular closed-ish network, or are supposed to. So what you can do is you can just put in an IP address of something that you can find using Shodan, Census, etc. And then it will go ahead and scan and look deeper and find all of the devices that are actually attached to the one that's exposed. And will also show various functions that it's running, because that's part of the way that this particular protocol operates. Is off of functions, which can be like force coils and a few other things. Now, if you like PLCs, this particular one, it's a free PLC scanner, which looks directly for programmable logic controllers. And all you have to do is turn on, input the IP address, and it will then return which type of PLC it is, what the model number is, the name, the order code, firmware, if it's running or if there's an error, etc. That's got a lot of features. And the thing is, a lot of companies who are concerned about industrial cybersecurity don't think about the consequences or blocking or logging the use of more legitimate tools by malicious actors. So you can get away with a lot of stuff using these particular tools. And this is actually from a presentation I gave at some UN and NATO member state a cyber warfare exercise in Brussels, where I was showing that if you've got something that is Modbus and it also has a web server or any other functionality, there are ways that you can actually install remote access Trojans. And what this one is showing is that on port 81, a remote access Trojan called Extreme Rat was installed. And on the bottom, there's showing Modbus and part of the configuration in the vendor. And what had happened in this case was this was a European power station. And here is this Trojan installed on something that is also industrial. And you never know what could happen in those particular environments. So many people have digital thermostats, but this is just one particular use case for BACnet. It's actually used in a lot of different ways in a lot of different places worldwide. And it does have some limited security features. However, when it is installed, a lot of organizations won't use necessarily all the security features. Or again, because availability is queen, they want to make sure that everybody on the team knows the password and it's got to be quick and easy to get in, things like that. So this is what it would look like visually just using a home thermostat, but it's much, much more. Now, again, free census, not paid. It's got a lot of different fields that it can find because this particular protocol runs under UDP. That also means that if you're hitting it as an attacker, it will be harder to log because there's no handshake, say from TCP. But it can return all sorts of loveliness, like who the manufacturer is, what type of product, timestamps, and various information. You can also find what the firmware is, which is very handy if you go, hey, guess what? Let me put into DuckDuckGo the firmware version. Ooh, it's got known exploits. Woohoo! I now have something that runs BACnet that belongs to me now, basically. So you can return a whole lot of data from any sort of BACnet asset that's on the internet using Census. And then also this lovely free BACnet tool. It's from Contemporary Controls BACnet Discovery Tool, and I'll put the link up here for you. And what it does is, again, you can put in your IP address. The typical port number for BACnet is 47,808. Not many people ever change that default port number. And by the way, that's one of the ways that you can kind of protect yourself a little bit more is to change a lot of these default settings. And it will go ahead and search and look deep, almost as similar as the Modbus tool from Chipkin. Well, so it's quite handy. And it'll go deeper than, say, Shodan or Census or any other internet system web search. So a newer one, newer protocol called Tritium, which also goes by Fox. This is used worldwide. If you happen to like elevators, if you like, I don't know, police to protect you, various airports around the world, building management systems, which can also include tied-in alarm systems. So if you want to, say, turn off all the security at a building and then go rob it, and there's no video and no sensors on, there's a possibility you can do this if you learn how to use this particular protocol, and also it's run by Java. So some of the things, as an example, you can get from, say, Census, is it will tell you what it's running, what the versioning is, what the vendor is, the ID, sometimes even the serial number, what language it's running, etc. And this is quite handy again, because even though there are security features with this protocol and the programming language that is used to write a lot of the applications associated with it, the problem is a lot of organizations go, we have it done, plug it in. Now we don't have to worry about it. It's kind of like the concept of, we have a firewall, but we've never updated it. We've never looked at the rules, and there's still an any rule at the top. So it isn't plug in and forget about it. It actually needs to be maintained. So one of the things you can do is download a piece of software called Niagara AX. And what's interesting about this is, if you're pretty good with Java, the way it can work is anything that would be running the Tritium or Fox protocol, because there's usually a lot of lacking security, it will go ahead and connect to any of those systems, no matter what they are, as well as a few other protocols that are used in building management, industrial IoT, and certain types of IoT. And it's fantastic because it doesn't have to be, say, one particular vendor. They use this application and strive to be vendor neutral. So you can say hello inappropriately to all sorts of things. And to show you a few additional tools, because I love to use these quote unquote, well, they are legitimate tools, and use them for nefarious purposes, because they're much less likely to be picked up as a security issue. And this is one thing for organizations to understand, is if there's no reason why these tools should be used, then they should not be used. I like to do a lot of different things. So it isn't just, I don't know, production systems. Last year, I got a very, very interesting opportunity, because I also do things in maritime cybersecurity, where a particular company contacted me and they had a fun opportunity, something I thought was fun. And it was looking at the cybersecurity risks of a very large boat. And when I say boat, I mean more like a liquid natural gas ship that is worth many, many millions. And it's very, very large. And I looked at the issue and I approached it as any other control system, because it has the same type of components, except it's just on water and it moves physically all the time. And I said, that sounds like I should steal a boat. So I did add in for fun, and they actually accepted this, that when the ship is liberated, I get to wear an eye patch. And also when the ship is taken by the team, then I get to say, look at me, I am the captain now. Now, again, since maritime has a lot of legacy devices, and also it's one of the many industries which hasn't recognized the fact that they need cybersecurity, there were certain ways that the team were able to actually accomplish this goal. I believe the ship was worth 172 million British pounds. And a great, for instance, and way is the fact that these ships are really large. So the controls to actually move the ship are actually run via GPS on the civilian band. And there are multiple known ways to exploit the civilian band of the GPS. Also, there's a lot of the similar components as there is from power plant to water plant to a beer plant to whatever, is there's different layers, and those layers also exist on a ship. And they also might have this thing called, well, most of them do, a human-machine interface called the HMI. It's kind of like the speedometer on your car so that you can visually see what's going on. And many of these are running Windows CE, and most of the time, by the time you get a brand spanking new ship, it's already been a year or more sometimes for that ship to actually be built. So you're not getting the newest and greatest because they can't really plan for what might be coming out the day that the ship is launched. Or if you have a ship, it costs a lot of money to run these things, and they're not ripping out old Windows CE and other components that might be vulnerable. They're living with it because these are expensive to operate. There's also situations where, because they have to be connected, usually 4 different ways, that some of the VSAT systems that they run, the 4G, 3G modems that they run, UHF, VHF, a lot of the vendors in the space don't really security test their stuff. So when you can actually contact them when they are in range and see them over the internet or from a decent distance, not too far away, close enough, you can actually get into the web servers that are running on these VSAT systems, et cetera, and manipulate them, deny them service, do all sorts of piratey things. So with all of us working from home, and I'm giving this presentation from a temporary house right now this week, we also have to deal with the fact that everybody's now even more connected, and it's really accelerated the connectivity for everyone in the world. And with that, that means also a lot of things were set up hastily or out of necessity, right? Because not everybody wants to get sick and die of, you know, whatever 2020 wants to throw at us. So more and more stuff is remote, and I'll give you a new hashtag, an acronym to use: bring your own house. The idea of perimeter security has drastically changed to the point where it's no longer your office firewall, it is now your front door and how good the locks are, or how good your Wi-Fi security is, or how many people in your house are sharing it and what they're downloading and doing while you're trying to do work, which could be sensitive or not. And this also includes industrial engineers and technicians who can't go into work all the time right now because of, various quarantine and so forth. So it's good, but it can be very unfortunate. Now, one of the things I did was I looked for the top 10 countries that have things online in total. And that's what the more yellow bar is in this graph. The US by far has more, almost 47,500,000 different devices. And out of those, what I was also looking for in the orange was specifically remote related vulnerabilities that I knew were exploitable. So remote desktop protocol, which easy to exploit, certain types of FTP, certain versions of SSH, VNC, and a few other parameters. And so comparing the total amount of things that are saying hello to the total number of exploitable vulnerabilities I could find against that number. And in many cases, some of the assets that are shown in the yellow have multiple vulnerabilities and are quite porous and fragile. So the USA isn't doing too bad. Unfortunately, if you look at China, they've got a really bad ratio between the two. And the United Kingdom actually has the best ratio because several years ago, they started the Cyber Essentials program, mandating that any business or organization that wanted to do business with the United Kingdom's government and for various other reasons for critical infrastructure, that they had to actually audit, looking at very basic low-hanging fruit to take care of in order to continue. Now, I like to say, if it's a web server, hack it like a web server, because that's the whole idea behind IoT, is you've now made a piece of hardware internet capable and contactable, usually with a web server. So I I put in bold what I call a census dork. And what we're looking at on this slide is actually how to find Tesla Powerwall devices. And it's quite interesting because here we've got a situation where folks who have this, whether for industrial purposes, hospitals, or in their home, they don't have to say, keep it updated. Tesla does not force updates. There's no two-factor authentication available. And without even logging in, you can see all sorts of information about it. And that's not a very good thing. One of the things you can see is the configuration. You can also see the version. So you can go ahead and try to find a working exploit that would be viable against it. You can also see when's the last time somebody logged in and the time of the device itself and how long it's actually been on. That's quite handy as an attacker, because if nobody's really looking at it, they know that if they fool around with it, hey, nobody's probably going to be looking. And then there's various other things you can see, such as, is it updating? Is there a problem with the update? So you can see way too much information just by using this simple dork. And in this case, it happened to be a crane that was connected to the energy supply. So I almost had my own crane. Now, when we talk about aerospace, they too are a legacy market where unfortunately many aircraft manufacturers don't understand that they actually are in the business of making IoT devices, but just happen to make aircraft, because we have what's called E-enabled aircraft, which are gigantic IoT device aircraft. And in this case, here's an RDP session with administrator that's logged in. Most likely the password could be, I don't know, password. And this belongs to Airbus. The CN that you see in the slide is actually the certificate name that I could match directly to the real ownership of Airbus. And you can buy the services on the scary dark web of hacking into RDP devices starting from $1 to $10 each if it happens to be, say, a US military remote desktop protocol session that can be found. So I hope that shows you how easy it is to get into these things. Now, starting last year, and still some ongoing problems with this particular organization, because Boeing did not actually think that security was an issue. They were not using any encryption on their websites up until October 29th, 2019. They had a lot of issues with authentication, with cross-site scripting, with things, test and development servers wide open. Most security teams don't look at development servers because it triggers off a bunch of false stuff. They had hard-coded credentials. I could gain access to the test flight control software just by using NoScript in Firefox, and the message said, you're not using scripts, you're not running scripts, just press this button. I pressed the button and I was into their R&D section. I ended up writing a 59-page report, giving it over to the US government because Boeing was not very pleased with any security researchers finding issues with their stuff, nor was their third party who coded some of it Exostar. And I'm still embroiled in a bit of a legal battle with them, even though I did nothing illegal. So this is pretty serious because Boeing has already had software issues that have caused aircraft to go down and crash and kill people. In 2009, I happened to be at an aircraft crash where a Turkish Airlines plane, 737NG, crashed outside of my workplace where I could see it. And the same sensor issue that they had in the Maxes, part of that software code was used in that Turkish Airlines crash. So the issue of aviation cybersecurity is very near and dear to my heart. So we also like food. I think most of us like to eat sometimes. And we also have to understand that these types of systems are used extensively in agriculture. For a great example is the Netherlands is the #2 food exporter in the world, even though we have a population of 17 million. And that's because we've got the most modern industrial and IoT driven agriculture in the world. Our farmers have robots and drones. And nobody wants to kill a bunch of fish. This happens to be a salmon farm somewhere in Europe, and that would be mean. So taking a look at something, an organization that operates in Latin America, they do a lot of different chemical processing and also are a very large bottled water provider for both Latin America, some parts of the Middle East, and South Africa. And Mexichem is a large enough country or company that should have security. And unfortunately, they left a port called LDAP open amongst some other ports, where I was able to get 24 pages of assets from the business side and from the industrial side that I could actually connect to. And this was a bit of a shame. One of the series of devices I could connect to on the industrial side was a Siemens system, a human machine interface, where without even logging in, because they never turned it on, I could change the recipes or how things were actually produced. I could even get a hold of the hard drives that were connected to it, wipe them, do whatever I wanted, change the configuration, export the administrative data, anything I wanted to. And this particular model and version was also used in the Black Energy attacks in the Ukraine. So yeah, should not be on the internet. And we also have to think of the fact that most of us have printers or access to printers, and these can actually expose industrial areas, hospitals, legal firms, etc., because they are an IoT device, especially when you deal with the all-in-one scanner, more commercial series where they have a hard drive in them. Human resources love to use these because they're great, easy, and you get your job done. But they also store things like passports, insurance information that's been scanned, all sorts of sensitive information. And if you can find one of these printers, there is no printer vendor I have ever run into that has ever been concerned with any type of cybersecurity. None of them. Yet it is a gaping hole in your organization because it can be used as a pivot point. In addition to that, I was able to dual use, for example, Brother's own admin tool, and it would allow me to connect to any printer in the world that I could find, and I could send files to it. There's cross-site scripting, path transversals, you name it. And this is what it looked like. And you can freely download this tool, and it covers about, I don't know, the sheet looked like about 1,000 models, basically everything that Brother has. Epson has this type of tool, Xerox, all of the manufacturers, and they've never tested them once or have been concerned with cybersecurity. So my background today was space. I like space. And we also have to understand that there are some assets in space that have been up there for 50 years now. There's also land-based systems that might not be taking cybersecurity very seriously, and they have to connect up to satellites. Because of latency and the slowness of the quote-unquote bandwidth of the space to ground systems, encryption is not usually used very much. We've also seen a particular type of malware using a satellite system that was hacked as a hop so that police could not figure out where the criminals actually were. And last year, we ran the UK's first space hackathon with Oxford, Royal Holloway University and De Montfort University, and also been working with and presenting at Cambridge's New Space IoT R&D section on some of these issues. So you can actually find certain space assets, especially the more modern ones, or at least relays and land stations that would then communicate upwards. In this particular case, what I was able to find was an actual device running this famous, lovely Modbus as well as another protocol which is not hugely secure. And by looking at the information that I got back, I was able to determine that it's actually part of a system that will, say, fold, unfold, and move solar arrays on satellite systems. So one of the reasons why this is important is recently, actually last month, I was asked by the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research to comment on one of their reports when it comes to cyber warfare and securing critical infrastructure. And if the UN is worried about it, and this particular part of the UN is worried about it, this is something that we have to be concerned with. And gladly, I'm not an evil hacker anymore, but if I can easily find all of this information on the internet with not a huge amount of effort on my part, in my opinion, although there is 20 plus years of experience, imagine what nefarious parties can do. This is actually from 2009, where I was able to detect IT and ICS devices that were being leveraged by North Korea with malware to attack South Korean infrastructure and also part of the United States infrastructure. So I will end it at that. I wanted to thank Edgar and Salma very, very much for inviting me. If you want to know more, I've got a couple of books available, and also wouldn't mind any input you might have available at the Middle East Institute, as we're just starting the cyber program for that. And feel free to contact me either by LinkedIn or Twitter. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Oh, it took off the virtual background.
Yeah, well, that's cool. But that was amazing. Salma, what do you think? Because you're the newbie. When you hear all these things about
Really
cybersecurity.
interesting because, for example, I didn't know that even in space, you can have all this cybersecurity environment that is so important. Oh my God, your exposure everywhere. Everywhere.
Yes.
She got it. She got it very quickly.
And I love space as you.
Yeah, I love space. I love space.
So, Chris, a couple of days ago, in fact, when we were starting the Tactical Edge, there was a series of explosions in gas stations worldwide. And they were like, it started in Russia, and then it went somewhere in the Middle East, and then I think it was in Baltimore. You just heard that once. And I'm like, we're all in the industry. The first thing I tell some of my friends, I'm like, what the heck is going on? Anything you can share on that, or that's all right? Hush, hush.
I can say it would not be the first time that either a process or some of the machinery was purposely manipulated. We've already seen the world's first case of cyber being used to directly kill people in Germany in 2014, I believe, where it was a German steel mill where they got on both the business and the production side, interrupted the processes, somehow shut off the auto shutdown process, and then it exploded from pressurization, and it killed 3 people and it injured many, many more, just bursting into flames. Imagine a steel mill with all that hot metal. And they never attributed the attacks, but many over here believe that it was a nation state that was practicing and did an oopsie. Oof. Yes, yes.
That's yeah, no, I mean, at this point, anything that happens, you always think, wow, did that really happen? Was it a real accident? And this is too coincidental. Yeah. You said something that was funny, and then it turned serious really quickly. That airlines or airplane companies building large IoT devices and they don't know it. I thought that was hilarious. In fact, I tweeted it. I'm like, LOL. And then you quickly went and made it into extremely serious because a security weakness or vulnerability in any of these devices turns deadly.
Absolutely. And it's very frustrating because if you are on an aircraft, it doesn't matter if you're a passenger, an aircrew member, or a mechanic, if you see something that looks wrong, you can actually call it out and they'll break for safety, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you see something wrong in the software, especially if I could get into the flight control software, that should be a big no-no, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because those things are then put on mechanics' laptops and sometimes floppy disks, depending on the aircraft, and then put into the aircraft. And so if you know what you're doing, that could be very bad, right? You could turn off a sensor.
Yeah.
Even though, for example, Boeing sold cybersecurity consulting services to the US government, they did not use encryption on any of their login websites.
So
because they didn't quite understand the issue. And we've seen these 737 MAX, it's a software issue.
yes.
On the sensor, and it's already killed people.
Yes.
And there has to be this understanding that it is software driven, it's internet connected or connected somehow, like especially when they pull into airports, they then connect, depending on the trust of the airport, to download and upload data. And a lot of airports I find are really bad in cybersecurity. So the industry as a whole really needs to pay attention, because it's something like, one crash will go, oh, I'm not going to fly. 2 crashes, holy moly. But people need to be safe and have that warm, fuzzy feeling, especially since a lot of airlines are going, how are we going to stay in business after COVID? How are we going to get people to fly?
Right.
Well, yeah.
Exactly. You just gotta make sure that they're secure. Let's talk about the printers. You made a statement there that you haven't met a vendor yet who is concerned with cybersecurity.
Not a single one. Not a single one. And I have a very good friend who took an internship with Minolta recently.
Okay.
And when he brought up cybersecurity, they go, no, we don't deal with that. And it's like, but don't you understand that this is a beautiful pivot, or the amount of private information that could be on it, especially commercial grade.
Commercial printers, yeah.
I mean, it's a huge exposure, and they really need to take it seriously. I haven't even met or seen a printer vendor that has a vulnerability disclosure program. At least Boeing learned. They started their first vulnerability disclosure program after my report based on it.
Oh, that's awesome.
But Epson, Minolta, all of these others are like, yeah.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, we're a printing vendor, not cybersecurity. In the top 10 countries assets online versus number of remote access vulnerabilities, do you just focus on different parts of the world? Because I don't see, usually they include Mexico and Brazil and all these things, and I don't see them here.
They did not have the, say, top 10 number of devices online.
Really?
So I looked at the entire world, and those just happen to be the top 10 of the most things that were connected online. So Brazil would have made it if I extended it to, say, the top 15, right?
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, that's the reason why.
Okay, wow. And then you showed how easy it is to identify all these things, and there's a lot of public accessible. Shogun is the one that's best known, and you just showed a couple of new ones that I haven't heard of. So that's great.
And free.
And free.
Free. That means that, if you're struggling with the budget, right?
Yeah.
You can then raise up your maturity very quickly.
And this is just a question off left field, because a friend of mine just got certified, from one of these large industry standards, on a professional certified, for ICS or whatever. Do you see any of these training companies or these training organizations letting all these newly certified experts know about all these tools available for free? Do you, keep them actualized?
Not most of them, no. Some of them that are more government related, they do. I recently, I don't want to be salesy, but I built one for Cyber, because I'm on the advisory board to advance their training. But usually to see all these tools, some of the techniques, usually it's like DHS or a national level computer emergency response team that will do that, but the rest, not really. which is a bit unfortunate, but it could also be a very good thing because that means that a lot of the training companies are just coming out with very basic knowledge, but not enough to kill people with technology. So that's a benefit.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. In a tactical edge event that we had for Latin America last year, we had a person from, I believe he was from El Salvador. Anyway, he's an expert at doing what you were doing, but he was focusing on critical infrastructure. And he actually did a hack live into an exposed gas tank where he could change the sensor and the sensor will lie, and because the sensors will go off when they're filling up the gas tank, right? And the sensor and he can modify it that he says no, it's still empty, and so it continues to flow, overflows, and then you have a nice bomb in there.
Yep.
That to me, that was shocking.
Yeah, a lot of what do you call gasoline stations in your country?
Yeah, gas stations, petrol.
Petrol. I know in Costa Rica they call bomba.
Bombas, bombas,
yeah,
sí.
right?
Yeah, in
And
Spanish, bomba.
right, and
It's the
right.
same.
So a lot of gasoline stations will have sensors and remote access to the level of tanks, so that they can then automatically start getting tankers to fill up. You can actually find a lot of them and adjust what's in there.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's crazy because this stuff is, flammable and dangerous to the environment as well if there's a spill.
And that's what I was saying, with the story with the explosions in different parts. It's like, yeah, that's something else going on. What's next for Chris? What's next for you?
I'm currently writing a paper on the Armenian-Azerbaijani, what I call cyber guerrilla warfare conflict, because since July, there have been two major patriotic hacker groups that have been quite active attacking each other. And now Turkey has stepped in on the Azerbaijani side, Russia has stepped in on the Armenian side, both saying, we'll give you all the arms you want. And then Azerbaijan has now threatened to blow up the nuclear power plant in Armenia. And both teams are the hacker teams are trying to attack critical infrastructure, and the Armenian team, the Monty Malkovian cyber army, recently hacked into the Azerbaijani health database and downloaded all the people who were tested, who are being watched, and who are positive, and all their personal information.
Wow.
So it's picking apart, and now there's a nuclear threat. And I also think I've seen how they've evolved over the years. And suddenly when Russia and Turkey came into place last month, I don't think it's just arms that those two countries have been sharing, like military weapons. It looks like they've also been sharing offensive security tools and training, because their level of sophistication went
wow,
super fast. So that's what I'm looking at right now.
Wow, that's incredible. that's incredible.
Very impressive.
Yes.
I just like that whole technology.
I tell you, that I love seeing Salma's expressions and reactions, because she's in communications, right? She's a professional presenter and things like that. So cyber, what we're involved in, to us is normal now. To her is brand new, and her expressions and reactions, I'm like, oh yeah, to us it's already like so this is wonderful.
Good. I'm glad.
So Chris, thank you so much, very, very much. This is wonderful experience. Wow, it's fantastic, the information you gave us, and I hope everyone enjoyed it.
I hope so too, and I hope it woke them up.
I think so too. I now sell myself.
Excellent. Muchas gracias. Thank you for having me.
By the way, I love your hair.
My very fluffy hair. Yes.
Tomorrow I'm going to try to do something similar. We'll see.
Whoa! Challenge accepted.
All right.
No?
You got to tweet out a picture and CC me so that I can see what it looks like.
Okay.
All right. All right.
Thank you, Chris, so much.
Thank you.
Good day.
So
Good
Salma,
day.
half a day
Yeah,
done from Terrific Thursdays.
exactly.
Again, we want to thank all of you for hanging out with us, listening to Chris and to all our guests. That was a really good presentation. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Want to thank Ativo Network, Cellpoint, Exabeam, and CyberArk for their sponsorship. Hey, so I read today a tweet by CyberArk that they're offering free training, for their solutions or for their privileged access management. So head on out to their booth and ask them about it. It's
Really good opportunity. So go to CyberArk.
free
Our
training
service.
and visit Exabeam about they have good stuff on MITRE ATT&CK and Cellpoint on identity and Ativo Networks on deception technology, which is fantastic. So take a look at them, and we'll come back at 2 p.m. Central with our afternoon speakers, Tyrone Wilson, and then followed by Ira Winkler. So thank you so much.
I'll see you 2 p.m.
See you 2
Bye.
p.m. Bye-bye.